custodian hid that he was a math teacher until a child asked for help with homework. Robert Johnson was wiping the blackboard in room 3B at St. Mary's Academy in New York City when he heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. It was almost 6 in the evening, and the school was practically empty. Just him and a few cleaning staff remained in the building that bustled with hundreds of students during the day. Then the door slowly opened, and a girl of about 11 walked in, her eyes red from crying. She held a math test with a failing grade stamped in the upper right corner. "Sorry, mister," she said, her voice trembling. "I know you're working, but could you help me with this homework?" Robert stopped cleaning and looked at the child. It was Emma Williams, daughter of one of the most influential families in the neighborhood. He'd always seen her in the halls, but had never spoken to her. "What happened, sweetheart?" he asked, setting the rag aside. "I got a D on my math test. If I don't improve by the end of the semester, I'll be expelled," she sobbed. "My mom will kill me when she finds out." Robert hesitated. He knew he shouldn't get involved, but something in the child's desperation touched his heart. He glanced around, checking that no one was nearby, then sat at the desk beside her. "Let me see that test," he said, holding out his hand. Emma handed him the crumpled paper. Robert skimmed the problems and immediately saw the issue. The questions were about linear equations, but the girl was making basic mistakes in solving them. "Look, Emma, the problem isn't that you don't understand. It's that you're making it harder than it needs to be," he explained, picking up a pencil. "I'll show you a trick that'll make it easy." With surprising clarity, Robert began explaining the concepts. He drew small diagrams on the back of the test, used everyday examples, and within minutes he had the girl understanding what teachers hadn't managed in weeks. "Wow, mister, you explain way better than Miss Jennifer," Emma exclaimed, her eyes bright with understanding. Robert smiled, feeling a joy he hadn't known in years. It was as if a dormant part of his soul had awakened. "Now try solving this one on your own," he said, pointing to another problem. Emma took the pencil and, following Robert's method, solved the equation effortlessly. "I did it!" she shouted, jumping from her chair. At that moment, the classroom door swung open. Principal Victoria Adams walked in with a stern expression, dressed in her impeccable navy suit. "What's going on here?" she asked firmly. Robert immediately stood up, grabbing the cleaning rag again. "I was just cleaning the room, Principal." "He was helping me with math," Emma interrupted. "Mr. Johnson explains way better than any teacher in this school." Principal Victoria raised an eyebrow and eyed Robert with suspicion. "Mr. Johnson, your job here is to maintain the school, not teach. Return to your duties at once." "But Principal," Emma tried to argue, "and you, Miss Williams, should be at home doing your assignments, not wasting time with games," the principal cut in. "Now everyone to their proper places." Robert lowered his head and left the room, but not before exchanging a glance with Emma. There was a silent promise in that look, as if he was saying this wasn't over. The next day, Emma arrived at school early. She had noticed something strange the day before. Robert seemed to know far more about math than a simple custodian should. She decided to investigate. At 5:30 in the morning, she hid behind a pillar in the courtyard and watched Robert arriving for work. To her surprise, instead of heading straight to the janitor's closet, he walked toward the library. Emma followed him discreetly and was shocked by what she saw. Robert was sitting at a table in the back of the library with several advanced math books open in front of him. He was taking notes in an old notebook and seemed completely absorbed in his studies. For 2 hours until classes began, Robert stayed there studying concepts Emma didn't even know existed. Differential calculus, linear algebra, analytic geometry. These were books even the school's teachers rarely consulted. When Robert finally put the books away and headed to the janitor's closet, Emma followed him. She needed to understand what was going on. "Mr. Robert," she called out as he was gathering his cleaning supplies. He startled, clearly not expecting to be discovered. "Emma, what are you doing here so early?" "I saw you in the library," she said bluntly. "Why would a janitor be studying advanced math books?" Robert turned pale. For a moment, it seemed like he would deny everything. But when he looked into the girl's determined eyes, he realized lying wouldn't help. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Sit here, he said, pointing to an overturned crate. I'll tell you the truth, but you have to promise not to tell anyone. Emma nodded eagerly. I'm not just a janitor, Emma. I mean, I am now, but in the past, I was a university math professor. I taught for over 20 years at Columbia University. Emma's eyes widened. Really? But then why are you working here? Robert sighed deeply. It was a story he hadn't told anyone in years. Bad things happened in my life, child. Things that made me lose everything I'd built. My job, my reputation, my family. This is the only way I can survive now. But you're still studying. Math is like breathing to me. Even after everything that happened, I can't stop. So I come early, study a little, and then do my cleaning work. Emma was silent for a moment, processing the revelation. Mr. Robert, could you teach me more? I promise I won't tell anyone. Robert hesitated. He knew this could bring trouble, but there was something in the girl's determination that moved him. All right, but it has to be our secret deal. Deal. From that day on, Emma and Robert established a routine. Every afternoon after regular classes, she would return to school with the excuse of having forgotten something. Robert would meet her in room 3B, and for an hour they studied math together. Robert discovered that Emma was a brilliant student. The problem wasn't a lack of ability, but how the material was being presented to her. With his methods, which combined academic rigor with simple, practical explanations, the girl began to progress quickly. In 2 weeks, Emma improved so much that she scored a 90 on her next math test. Teacher Jennifer was surprised, but didn't suspect anything. Well done, Emma. It seems you've finally grasped the material, the teacher said in front of the whole class. Emma smiled, but inside she was eager to tell Robert about the result. That afternoon she ran to room 3B. Mr. Robert, I got a 90, she shouted, showing him the test. Robert smiled with genuine pride. It had been years since he'd felt the satisfaction of seeing a student improve. Congratulations, child, you deserve it. You've worked very hard. This is just the beginning, right? Can you teach me more advanced things? Robert laughed. Take it easy, little one. Let's go step by step. First, you need to master the basics well. But their peace didn't last long. A week later, during one of their improvised lessons, Principal Victoria appeared at the classroom door again. This time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Catherine Williams, Emma's mother and one of the most influential businesswomen in the area. She owned a chain of clothing stores and had a strong, authoritarian personality. Emma Williams, Catherine shouted. What are you doing here at this hour? Emma paled. Her mother never came to the school. She always left everything to the secretary. Her being there in person meant something very serious had happened. Mum, I was studying, the girl stammered. Studying with a janitor. Catherine looked at Robert with obvious disgust. Victoria, what kind of school are you running here? The principal was clearly embarrassed. Mrs. Catherine, I had already warned Mr. Johnson about this. He shouldn't be interfering with teaching activities. Robert stood up, trying to explain. Ma'am, I was just helping the girl with some simple questions. Helping? Catherine laughed scornfully. A janitor helping my daughter? Do you know who I am? I pay a fortune for my daughter to attend this school precisely so she doesn't have to mix with people like you. Mom, stop, Emma shouted. Mr. Robert teaches me better than any teacher here. Catherine glared at her daughter furiously. You will be quiet. And you, she pointed at Robert, are fired. I don't want you anywhere near my daughter. Mrs. Catherine, please, the principal interjected. Mr. Johnson is a good employee. Maybe we can just give him a warning. Victoria, either you fire him now or I pull my daughter out of this school and make sure every other family knows you allow staff to harass children. The principal sighed. She knew she had no choice. The Williams family was one of the school's biggest contributors. Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry, but I'll have to terminate your contract. Robert nodded with dignity. He had expected this day would come. I understand. I'll gather my things. No, Emma cried, tears streaming down her face. You can't do this. He didn't do anything wrong. Emma, we're leaving. Now, Catherine ordered, gripping her daughter's arm. As mother and daughter walked out, Robert began packing his few belongings. He had worked at that school for 3 years. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Principal Victoria stayed in the room, clearly uncomfortable. "Robert, I'm truly sorry. You're a good employee. If it weren't for the Williams family's pressure..." "I understand, Principal. You have a school to run, no need to explain." As Robert finished packing, Emma managed to break free from her mother in the hallway and ran back to the classroom. "Mr. Robert!" She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "I'm sorry, it's my fault." Robert hugged the girl, his heart breaking. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Never think that. You're a smart, special girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But how will I learn math without you? You've already learned the most important part. Now just keep practicing. And remember what I always tell you, math is all around us. You just have to know how to see it." Catherine reappeared at the door. "Emma, now!" Robert gently let the girl go. "Go on, sweetheart, and study hard, okay?" Emma nodded sadly and left with her mother. Robert finished gathering his things and walked out of the school where he had worked for the past few years. As he stepped onto the street, he felt the familiar weight of defeat. Once again, the past had come back to haunt his present. Arriving at his small apartment in the Queens neighborhood, Robert sat in the kitchen and looked at the job listings. At 58, finding work wasn't easy, especially for someone with his history. That night, he barely slept. He kept thinking about Emma and how she was handling the situation. The girl had shown so much potential, such a thirst for learning. It was unfair that she was being denied a proper education because of her mother's prejudices. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Meanwhile, at the Williams family mansion, Emma was locked in her room, refusing to come out for dinner. Catherine knocked on the door several times, but the girl didn't respond. "Emma, stop this tantrum," shouted Catherine. "That man wasn't fit to teach you. I'll hire a private tutor for you." "I don't want another tutor," Emma yelled back. "Mr. Robert was the best," Catherine sighed. She didn't understand why her daughter was making such a fuss over a simple janitor. The next morning, Emma woke up determined. She knew she had to do something to help Robert. During her school break, she looked for Miss Dorothy, a school employee who had worked there for over 20 years. "Miss Dorothy, you know Mr. Robert well, right?" The elderly woman in charge of the school cafeteria nodded. "Yes, dear, a good, hard-working man. What they did to him yesterday was an injustice." "Do you know anything about his past?" "He told me he used to be a teacher." Miss Dorothy glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Come here, dear. I'll tell you something, but you can't tell anyone." They sat in a quiet corner of the cafeteria. Robert Johnson really was a university professor, one of the best this country has ever seen. I heard the whole story from my sister, who worked at the university back then. Emma leaned forward, eager to hear. "What happened to him?" "About 10 years ago, he was accused of falsifying some academic research. They said he copied other professors' work and published it as his own." "But is that true?" Miss Dorothy shook her head. "My sister always said no. She had known Robert for years and knew he was an honest man. But the accusation came from a very influential colleague, Professor Richard Thompson, who wanted the department chair position. And then? Robert was fired from the university, lost his reputation. His wife left him and took the children. He lost everything. My sister told me he spent years trying to prove his innocence, but no one believed him." Emma's heart ached. Now she understood why Robert was so reserved and why there was so much hidden knowledge in that humble man. "Miss Dorothy, where can I find proof of his innocence?" "Oh dear, that was so long ago. And even if there was proof, who would believe an 11-year-old? But Emma didn't give up. That afternoon, instead of going home, she went to the neighborhood's public library. She knew it was a difficult task, but she had to try. For 3 hours, she researched everything she could find about Robert Johnson and the academic fraud case. The internet didn't have much information, but she managed to find a few old newspaper articles about the scandal. One article caught her attention. It was from a small paper published 2 years after Robert's dismissal. The headline read, "Retired Professor Confesses False Accusations Against Colleague." Emma read the entire article, her heart racing. Professor Richard Thompson, now retired and with health problems, had confessed in an interview that he had forged the evidence against Robert Johnson because he was jealous of his colleague's success and recognition. "I couldn't accept that he was better than me," read a quote from Richard in the article, "so I created a plan to destroy his career. Now I carry that guilt every day." The article ended by saying that Robert Johnson had not been located for comment on the confession. Emma printed the article and kept it in her backpack. Now she had concrete proof of Robert's innocence, but she knew she needed more. In the following days, Emma continued her investigation. She discovered that Professor Richard Thompson was still alive and living in a nursing home in the Upper East Side of New York City. She also found out that Robert had published several important scientific papers and that his work was still cited by researchers worldwide. With all this information, Emma devised a plan. She knew she couldn't face her mother alone. She needed help. During recess, she approached some classmates who also struggled with math. "Hey, do you guys remember Mr. Robert, the janitor who got fired?" "I do," said Olivia, a girl with curly hair. "My mom mentioned the scandal." "Well, did you know he actually knows math? He helped me, and my grades improved a lot." "Really?" asked Ethan, a boy who always got low grades. "I swear, and I found out he was a wronged university professor. If we can prove his innocence, maybe he can teach again." Olivia perked up. "How can we help?" Emma explained her plan. They would gather evidence about Robert's innocence and present it to their parents and the principal, but first they needed to convince Robert not to give up. "Does anyone know where he's living now?" Ethan asked. "I can find out," said Emma, "but we'll need your help to convince the adults." That afternoon, Emma pretended to go to English class, but instead went to Queens to look for Robert. She asked at several buildings until a doorman pointed her to the right one. When Robert opened the apartment door and saw Emma, he looked worried. "Emma, what are you doing here? Does your mother know you came?" "No, Mr. Robert. I skipped class. I need to talk to you." Robert let her in, clearly nervous. "Kid, you shouldn't be here. If your mother finds out, there'll be trouble." "I found out the truth about you," Emma said, pulling the papers from her backpack, "about Professor Richard and the false accusation." Robert paled when he saw the documents. "How did you get these?" "I looked online, and there's more, Mr. Robert. Other kids at school need your help. Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, they're all struggling with math." "Emma, I can't teach anymore. You saw what happened. But what if we can clear your name? What if we can prove to everyone that you're innocent?" Robert sighed, sitting on the worn-out couch. "Kid, I tried for years. No one believes me. But now we have proof, and there are kids willing to testify that you're a great teacher." Robert looked at the determined girl and felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. "What do you have in mind?" Emma smiled. "A plan to show everyone who you really are." Over the next week, Emma and her friends worked on the plan. They gathered all the evidence of Robert's innocence, organized testimonies from students who could benefit from his teaching, and prepared a presentation for the parents and school administration. Olivia even convinced her mother, a lawyer, to review the documents. The lawyer was impressed by the quality of the evidence and agreed to help. Ethan convinced his father, who was a journalist, to investigate the story further. The journalist uncovered even more information about the injustices committed against Robert. Meanwhile, Emma continued visiting Robert every afternoon. She noticed he seemed more cheerful, as if he had regained some of his self-confidence. "You know, Emma, talking to you and your friends has reminded me why I love teaching," Robert said during one of these visits. "And you're really good at it, Mr. Robert. The other teachers at school don't explain even a third of what you do." "Every student is unique, my dear. The secret is finding the right way to reach each one." That's when Emma had a brilliant idea. "Mr. Robert, what if we organized a demonstration class? One where you teach math to several students at once in front of parents and the principal?" Robert hesitated. "I don't know, Emma. It could go very wrong. Or it could go very right. You could prove to everyone what an amazing teacher you are, and I guarantee a lot of people will be interested once they know the truth." After much thought, Robert agreed. He knew it was risky, but he also knew he couldn't spend the rest of his life hiding. Emma and her friends organized everything in secret. They chose a Saturday morning and convinced 12 students from the school to participate in the demonstration. They also invited the students' parents and sent a formal invitation to Principal Victoria. The chosen location was the neighborhood community hall, which Olivia managed to borrow through her mother. On the Friday before the demonstration, Emma finally told her mother everything. "Mom, I need to tell you something important." Catherine was in her home office reviewing company spreadsheets. "Make it quick, Emma. I'm busy." "It's about Mr. Robert, the janitor you had fired." Catherine sighed, irritated. "Emma, we've already talked about this. That man wasn't suitable. He was a university professor for 20 years, Mom, and he was fired unfairly because of a lie." Catherine stopped typing and looked at her daughter. "What do you mean?" Emma placed all the documents she had gathered on her mother's desk. "He's innocent, Mom. There's proof of everything here. And tomorrow he's giving a demonstration class to prove he's a great teacher." Catherine picked up the papers and began reading. As she did, her expression changed. "My God. Emma, where did you get all this?" "I researched, Mom, because I believe in him. And tomorrow you can see for yourself what kind of teacher he is." Catherine was silent for a long time, processing everything. "Emma, even if all of this is true, I've already caused this man so much trouble. How can I show up at the demonstration after everything I've done?" "By showing up and apologizing, Mom. It's never too late to do the right thing." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On Saturday morning, Robert arrived at the community hall an hour before the scheduled time. He was nervous but also excited. He had spent the whole week preparing a special lesson on solving everyday math problems. Emma arrived shortly after, accompanied by Olivia and Ethan. "Mr. Robert, are you ready?" "I think so, my dear. And did you bring the materials I asked for?" "We brought everything," Olivia said, showing a box with poster boards, colored markers, and calculators. "And the other students, are they really coming?" "Everyone confirmed," Ethan assured him. "And some parents too." By 9 o'clock, the hall began to fill up. The 12 invited students arrived, along with their parents. Director Victoria also appeared, though she seemed uncomfortable. Robert arranged the desks in a semicircle and prepared the materials on the makeshift table at the front. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "My name is Robert Johnson, and today I'm going to show you that math can be fun and easy to understand." He started with a simple problem: how to calculate how much paint would be needed to cover a wall. But the way he explained it was revolutionary. He had the students measure the walls of the room itself, calculate the areas, subtract the doors and windows, and arrive at the final result. Within minutes, children who had always hated math were excitedly solving problems. "Now let's look at a more complex problem," Robert said. "Imagine you want to organize a birthday party for 100 people. How do you calculate how much food and drinks to buy?" He divided the students into groups and assigned each group a part of the problem. One group calculated the food, another the drinks, another the decorations. In the end, everyone presented their solutions, and Robert showed how to combine everything into a final answer. The parents were amazed. They had never seen their children so engaged in a math lesson. "Incredible," murmured Olivia's mother to the director. "Why don't our children have lessons like this at school?" Director Victoria was clearly uneasy. She realized she had made a huge mistake by firing Robert. Just then, the doors of the room opened, and Catherine Williams walked in, accompanied by an elderly woman with white hair. Robert saw her and tensed up. This was the woman responsible for his dismissal. Catherine approached the front of the room. "Excuse me," she said, interrupting the lesson. "May I say a few words?" Robert nodded, unsure what to expect. "First, I'd like to introduce myself to those who don't know me. My name is Catherine Williams, and I was responsible for Professor Robert's dismissal from the school where my daughter attends." A murmur spread through the room. "I'm here today to offer a public apology. I judged this man without knowing his story and caused a terrible injustice." She turned to Robert. Professor Johnson, I looked into your history after my daughter showed me the evidence. I discovered you are one of the greatest authorities in math education in the country and that you were the victim of a cowardly setup. Robert was stunned. This was the last thing he expected to hear. Furthermore, Catherine continued, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Margaret Wilson, who was Professor Johnson's student 15 years ago and is now the head of the math department at New York University. The elderly woman stepped forward. It's an honor to see my former mentor again, Professor Margaret said. Robert Johnson was the teacher who influenced my career the most. When I learned through Mrs. Williams that he was here, I made sure to come in person. She addressed the parents in the room. You have no idea how lucky you are. This man is a genius in education. His teaching methods are studied in universities around the world. Robert was too moved to speak. Emma stood up. Mr. Johnson, can you continue the lesson? Everyone's loving it. Robert smiled, wiping away a stubborn tear. Of course, sweetheart. The lesson continued for another hour. Robert taught statistics through a survey about everyone's favorite sports. He taught geometry by building shapes with recycled materials. He taught algebra through cooking recipes. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Director Victoria approached him. Professor Johnson, I'd like to offer you a position as our school's academic coordinator, with a salary worthy of your qualifications. Robert was surprised. Principal, I appreciate the offer, but before accepting anything, interrupted Professor Margaret, I'd like to make a proposal. The university is looking for a visiting professor for the mathematics education department. It would be a temporary one-year position, but it could lead to a permanent role. The parents present began chatting excitedly. Professor Robert, said Olivia's mother, regardless of what you decide about work, I'd like to hire you for private lessons for my daughter. Me too, said another parent. And me, echoed several voices. Robert looked around, seeing all those friendly faces, and felt he was finally coming home. I need some time to think about all these offers, he said. But what I can promise is that I'll keep teaching. It's what I love to do. Emma ran to him and hugged him. I knew it would work out, Mr. Robert. Thank you, sweetheart. None of this would have happened without you. Catherine approached. Professor Robert, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd love for you to keep giving private lessons to Emma, and of course at whatever price you think is fair. Robert smiled. Mrs. Williams, Emma is an exceptional student. It'll be a pleasure to keep teaching her. And no need to hide it, said Emma, laughing. Now everyone knows you're an amazing teacher. Professor Margaret stepped forward again. Robert, I'd like to talk to you about the university's proposal. How about lunch to discuss it further? It would be an honor, Professor Margaret. As people began saying their goodbyes, Emma made a list of all the parents interested in private lessons. Look, Mr. Robert, there are already 15 kids who want lessons with you. Robert laughed, still processing everything. Slow down, Emma. We'll organize this carefully. Principal Victoria approached one last time. Professor Robert, I understand if you don't want to work at our school anymore after all that happened, but I want you to know the offer still stands. Principal, I hold no grudges. You were protecting the school. I'll consider your proposal too. When the room finally emptied, only Robert, Emma, Olivia, Ethan and Catherine remained. Mr. Robert, said Olivia, could you give us a lesson on how we proved your innocence? I think it'd be a great lesson on research and investigation. Robert laughed. Good idea, Olivia, but I think the three of you should teach that lesson. You were the real detectives in this story. We just followed what you taught us, said Ethan, to look for evidence, analyze data, and reach logical conclusions. Exactly, said Robert. Math isn't just numbers. It's a way of thinking. Catherine listened and was even more impressed. Professor, you've truly transformed my daughter. Not just her grades, but her way of thinking. Mrs. Williams, kids like Emma just need opportunity. They have a natural curiosity that, if guided well, can lead to great discoveries. Emma smiled proudly. Mum, now you see why I said Mr. Robert is the best teacher in the world. I understand perfectly, sweetheart, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. In the following days, Robert's story spread through the community. The journalist Ethan's father wrote a full article about the case in the local paper. The story gained attention, and soon Robert was receiving invitations from other schools and even TV shows. Robert decided to accept Professor Margaret's offer and return to the university as a visiting professor. But he also kept the private lessons for the neighborhood children, turning his living room into a small school. He also agreed to teach some classes at the school, where he had once worked as a janitor, but now as a guest instructor, developing a special math education project. Catherine, deeply changed by the experience, created a foundation to help professionals who had been wronged in their careers. The first beneficiary was, naturally, Robert, who received a scholarship to develop new teaching methods. Emma became Robert's volunteer assistant, helping organize classes and supporting other struggling students. She discovered she had as much talent for teaching as she did for learning. Olivia decided she wanted to be a teacher when she grew up and began shadowing Robert to better understand how education worked. Ethan found a passion for investigative journalism and started writing for the school newspaper. Principal Victoria implemented significant changes at the school, hiring more qualified teachers and creating support programs for struggling students. She also established a policy that all school staff, regardless of their role, should be treated with respect and dignity. Professor Richard Thompson, the man who had lied about Robert, learned of the story through the newspapers. Despite his failing health, he made a point of going to the university in person to apologize to Robert. It was an emotional meeting where Robert showed the greatness of character that always defined him, forgiving his former colleague. 6 months after the demonstration in the community hall, Robert was back in the university classroom, teaching future teachers. His first lecture was packed with students from other departments eager to attend. Teaching, Robert told the audience of young college students, isn't about transferring knowledge, it's about sparking curiosity. It's showing that every problem has a solution, and every solution can lead to new questions. Among the students in the audience was Emma, who had gotten special permission to attend the lecture. Even at just 11 years old, she was fascinated by the advanced math Robert was teaching. Professor Robert, one of the college students asked, "What's the secret to making math interesting for students of all ages?" Robert smiled, remembering a little girl crying in an empty classroom. "The secret is remembering that behind every number there's a story. Behind every equation there's a real problem, and behind every student there's a dream waiting to be discovered." After the lecture, Robert was surrounded by students eager to ask questions and learn more about his methods. Emma waited until everyone had left before approaching. "So, Mr. Robert, how was it coming back to the university?" "It was like coming home, my dear, but a home that's even better because now I know how to cherish every moment." "Do you regret going through all of that?" Robert thought for a moment. "You know, Emma, if I hadn't gone through that experience, I might never have met you. And meeting you and your friends reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. To change lives. To learn that students change teachers' lives just as much as teachers change students' lives." Emma grinned. "Mr. Robert, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Are you happy now?" Robert looked around the classroom, saw the students chatting excitedly about math, smelled the familiar scent of books and chalk, and realized that for the first time in many years, he felt whole. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again, my dear." That evening, Robert received a call from his ex-wife, Elizabeth. She had learned about the story through the newspapers and wanted to talk to him. "Robert, I needed to call you to apologize." "Elizabeth, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I should have believed you back then. I should have stood by you. You did what you thought was best for you and the children. I understand. The boys want to see you. They're proud of the father they have." Robert felt his eyes filling with tears. His sons, who were 8 and 10 at the time of the separation, were now teenagers of 18 and 20. "I'd love to see them too. How about lunch on Sunday? That would be perfect." When he hung up the phone, Robert realized his life had come full circle. Everything he had lost, respect, dignity, family, vocation, was returning in an even more meaningful way. The following Sunday, Robert had lunch with his sons for the first time in 10 years. Michael, the youngest, was studying engineering. William, the eldest, was an education student. "Dad," said William, "I chose education because of you. I always remembered how much you loved teaching. And I want to be an engineer because you taught me that math can build the world," added Michael. Robert openly wept. His sons had not only forgiven him, but had been inspired by him even during the difficult years. Emma continued taking lessons with Robert twice a week. She had become one of the top students in the school in all subjects, not just math. The method of thinking logically that Robert taught applied to any field of knowledge. One day, she arrived at the tutoring session with an unusual proposal. "Mr. Robert, I want to create a project to help other kids like me." "What kind of project?" "A free tutoring school for underprivileged children, using the methods you teach." Robert was impressed by the girl's maturity. "That's an amazing idea, Emma, but you're still very young for a project like this." "That's why I need your help. And my mum's too. She can secure funding." Robert realized Emma had inherited not just intelligence, but also Catherine's sense of social responsibility. "Let's talk to your mum about it." When Catherine heard about her daughter's idea, she was moved. "Emma, do you really want to do this?" "Yes, Mom. Mr. Robert taught me that knowledge only has value if it's shared." "Then let's make it happen." Within a few months, the Robert Johnson Community Math School was up and running on Saturdays in a space provided by the city. Robert coordinated the project, but relied on help from his former university students as volunteer teachers. Emma, though the youngest in the group, helped with organization and even taught younger children. She had discovered a natural talent for teaching. The project was so successful that other neighborhoods asked to replicate it. Within a year, 10 Robert Johnson schools were operating in New York City. The story gained national attention. Robert was invited to give talks on education across the country. He always brought Emma along, introducing her as the student who taught me we should never give up on our dreams. At one of these talks in Los Angeles, Robert was surprised by a special audience. Alongside the expected educators were many of the children he had taught over the years, including some of his former university students who were now renowned professors. "Professor Robert," said one former student, now a PhD in mathematics, "you always taught us that every problem has a solution. But what we really learned is that sometimes we ourselves are the solution to other people's problems." Robert looked at Emma, who was sitting in the front row with a proud smile, and realized the profound truth in those words. 2 years after the day, a crying girl had walked into an empty classroom. Robert received an official letter from Columbia University. They offered not just a formal apology, but also the title of Professor Emeritus, the highest academic honor the institution could bestow. Robert read the letter aloud to Emma. "Wow, Mr. Robert, are you going to accept it?" Robert carefully folded the letter and placed it in the drawer without opening the envelope containing the official documents. "You know, Emma, titles are important, but they don't define who we are. I'd rather be remembered as the teacher who was once a janitor and learned that knowledge doesn't choose a place or social status to flourish." "So you're not going to accept it?" "I'll keep the letter here, along with other important memories, but my answer to them will be different, that I'm too busy teaching children to discover they're capable of so much more than they imagine." Emma smiled. "You're the wisest teacher I know. And you're the student who taught me that sometimes the best teachers learn as much as they teach." The end. What did you think of this touching story? Could you feel Robert's triumph and little Emma's determination? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most and if you've ever been through a similar situation. Leave a like if the story touched your heart and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other incredible stories like this one.